Hello and welcome to Axiell Digital Days. I'm your host, Samantha Diamond, VP of Commercial Strategy at Axiell. This is an event we created to serve our community as widely as possible. And we're joined by folks around the globe for this event across our different community groups of museums and archives, public libraries, and schools. If you missed this, the beginning welcome video from Axiell CEO Joel Sommerfeld, I encourage you to check it out and other videos of our recordings channel. There's a link for this that can be found lower on this page. Sessions today commence with a presentation and then are followed by a live Q&A with the presenter and myself. Before we get started, just wanted to talk to you a little bit about how you can engage with Digital Days. As we move through the sessions, please log your questions for the presenter in the chat box. We'll do our best to address as many questions as possible. If we miss your question, get in touch with us using the link in the footer of this page. And you can check the agenda down there as well to see what's coming up next. You can also share your thoughts, ideas, and inspiration in our message board, which you will see the link to just under the chat. So first up, we have a presentation about Axiell Collections Roadmap. It's titled Usable, Flexible, and Connected, 3 Principles Driving Innovation in Axiell Collections. And it's presented by my colleague, Renee Vanderhoevel, Axiell Collections Product Manager. This is a presentation that's best for MIMSI users, COM users, and AdLib users, as well as Axiell Collections users. So as a reminder, you can log your questions in the chat box throughout the presentation, and we'll address them after. Enjoy.
Hi everyone, welcome to this presentation about the roadmap and innovations in Axiell Collections. My name is René van den Heuvel and I am the product manager for Axiell Collections. In this session, I'll be talking about highlights of the collections roadmap from recent and upcoming releases. All the new things we develop in Axiell Collections are mostly founded on 3 pillars: usable, flexible, connected, or usability, flexibility, and connectivity. A lot of the developments are related to the usability of the application, making working with collections easier, more efficient, faster, but flexibility is never let out of sight, as this has been an important core property of collections from the very beginning. It's been one of the reasons for choosing Axiell Collections for many organizations. The third pillar, connected or connectivity, has become more and more vital over the years, and we believe that its importance will keep on growing. This touches on, for instance, linked open data being managed from collections, but also on direct integrations with other products. Let's have a look at some examples that cover these 3 principles. Usable or usability in collections means that you can do more with the system and your data in a good way. Many of the new features we develop have been requested by our users, and they make up a considerable part of the Axiell Collections roadmap. Some of these changes may seem small, but they can still make a big difference in your everyday workflow of users. Some of the more exciting changes really allow doing more with the data that you manage. Let's begin looking at some examples of fairly recent releases. One of the more exciting new features in Axiell Collections is around reporting. Collections already included a number of ways to produce reports, for instance, via Word templates or exports, but creating reports that include counting and calculations with nice looking graphics and diagrams would take a number of steps. These types of reports have now become a lot easier to make with Excel templates. With Excel templates, the user can create templates themselves by listing the relevant field names in an Excel file that is going to act as the template. And an application manager can link these Excel templates to the user interface to make them available to all or selected users in an easy way. So this example that's on the screen at the moment is an Excel template and what it could look like. So what you see is a number of fields, field names and field tags. You can choose whatever you prefer. Those will populate the columns. And more interestingly, on the right side, you see total value. And this is where there's a calculation inserted into the template. So what happens when you push data from collections into this template, it could look like this. So it shows all the data in the columns that you've selected, but more interestingly, at the top, the total value is calculated automatically. Now, this is a simple example, of course, but this would be a nicer thing to do with Excel templates, perhaps. So from the data that you pushed into the Excel template, in the Excel file, you can create pivot tables, and those feed, for instance, these pie charts or other graphs or diagrams. So very, very nice looking reports you can create now with Excel templates. With a new way of indexing text in the database, we've seen new and improved ways of searching on text fields. This so-called full text indexing is a feature of SQL Server that we've now applied to the collections application. That is, it's an optional feature and you can switch it on to get its benefits. Some of these benefits include that you can do faster searching on texts. You can also search on phrases. The sequence of words usually contains phrase operator, and punctuation agnostic searching is now available. And the example I use a lot for this is the TV series NASH. This is spelled with punctuation, but not everybody knows that, and it's often searched for without. With this new way of indexing, it doesn't matter how you enter the search key, collections will find it either way. Some changes may seem small, but they can really make life a lot easier. Some examples of these changes. We're now showing the list number, that's the list number in the result list, in the record editor, in the status bar, and that's where the status bar sits. This means that if you work in the record editor without having the list view open, you can still see where you are in the sequence of records that you wanted to navigate. A similar change is that it's now possible to mark a record in the record editor and see if that record is marked or not. There's a button there on top of the screen where you can see the arrow. The total number of marked records shows in the status bar. Again, something that we've added. This means you can now flag or mark records without having the result list open. This is where you would traditionally do the marking of records. So again, this will help your workflows in the way you work with the system. In the media viewer, we've now added a download button, where before you could only download media files from the record editor in the media tab. And that could be cumbersome because if there were multiple media files attached to a record, you'd have to find the right one. That's no longer needed with this improvement. This button has been added to the system, the download button. The flexibility in the user interface makes it possible for individual users to make changes to their collections interface. More and more we add that to those user profiles, so that they stick in the application until a user changes the settings again. In the upcoming release, what we're looking at is an example of such a change. This is a link screen that we're looking at, and you could already change the width of the columns that you see. So for instance, if you want to change that you see more text in the scope note column, you could just change the size, the width of that column, but it wouldn't stick. In the upcoming version, it will be stored in the user profile. So next time the user logs on and goes to the same link screen again, the same settings will be applied. Another example, I don't have a screenshot for that, but another example of such a change is that we're now going to store the sorting settings in the result list of the user profile, so that if the user has changed a sorting in the result list, next time they do a search, they don't have to reapply the sort again because it's automatically keeping that same sort. Then in the media handling section, next up, there are some examples of new and exciting features that are coming in the next version or in the near future. Some of those will show in the next release, but while other developments may take a bit longer and span multiple milestones or releases. So a very nice new feature is the possibility of showing thumbnail images in line with the linked object records. For instance, looking at this example screenshot here from an exhibition record, but the same applies, for instance, to loan records with linked records, you can now see the thumbnails of those linked objects along with the object information. This is possible for so-called grids or inline grids, where you have a similar style of showing linked records comparable to the result view. This is a setting, configuration setting of the application, and the application manager can change that. It's also possible to change the size of the thumbnail by right-clicking with the mouse. If you have, let's say, the traditional way of listing linked object records, then that is an easy change that an application manager can do to make it look like this and to add a thumbnail. Other media handling things that we're doing is in the next version, we'll be able to show and view more media formats in the media viewer. The current list of supported formats is quite limited, and that's going to be extended in the next version of the software. It's also going to be IIIF compliant by default, with options for us to extend IIIF features in the future. We're also going to support handling of very large files, uploading and downloading of large files, say video files of 2 GB and up, is currently not possible. That's going to be possible in the next version. Another new feature coming soon is the option to get report information on the record history, also called journal. The journal is basically a log of any modifications that have been done by users across the system. So every field change is logged, every deletion is logged, etc. This means that you can get insights on modifications made across the database by users in a specified period of time. You can filter on the period, on the username, data source, and on field. So you could get, for instance, a list of which records were changed in the object number in a certain period of time. Those filtered lists you can also export to CSV, so you can also handle that data in presentations outside of collections. And this is where it's going to sit. I don't have a screenshot yet because we're working on it at the moment, but that's where you can later on find it. But these were smaller changes. There are some bigger changes ahead as well that we are currently working on and that are expected to span multiple milestones. Most notably, that's the UX UI work that we're doing, user experience, user interface. Axiell Collections has been around for about 7 or 8 years now, and new functionality and features, even new modules, have been added during this period. So it's been growing. Now it's time to evaluate the user interface and review the user experience. Our UX team has started working on this, and the outcomes of this review will appear on the collections roadmap. We expect that some of these changes that we want to make are quite substantial, but we want to make sure that we do this right and ensure that collections will remain current and modern and to bring to the user a great user experience. We expect that these developments will span multiple milestones and releases, and we'll try to bring some of these changes in an incremental way so that you can benefit from these improvements as soon as possible. Another big change is around the forms editor. It's a big development, and it's the replacement of the forms editor or screens editor from Axiell Designer. That's currently where we create input forms, edit forms, display forms that you see in collections. This is the first component of Designer that becomes web-based, and it will make application configuration a lot easier for the application managers with a what you see is what you get Forms Designer interface with more control over the screens or the forms layout and closer integration with collections. So hopefully we'll see some of this appearing before the end of the year already. The other pillar, flexible. As said before, flexibility has always been a cornerstone for Axiell Collections, and it will remain that way. Especially larger organizations really rely on this vital property of the application. With new features that we develop, we keep this in mind and we'll always try to implement them in a way that will suit most organizations. When possible, we'll make them user configurable in the user interface of collections, while for some other features, you can control their behavior in the settings of collections or via Axiell Designer. Over the years, collections has been growing with new features, making the system incredibly comprehensive. Now we're at a point where we can see that not every new functionality is needed by everyone, but they're still important for some of our customers and they add value to the collections application. This is why we're now introducing that some of the new features that we're developing are optional add-ons. This means that you can choose if you need them or not. If so, you can check in with your account manager to arrange for you to have these optional features switched on or configured. And depending on the feature, there's a one-off implementation fee and there can be an increase in maintenance. Examples of such optional features can include, these are just examples, AI functionality, artificial intelligence functions, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Extended media functions like DAMS-like functions such as bulk ingest, that could be an option, and the new record history reporting function that I just mentioned earlier is also a candidate to be an optional feature. The third pillar, connected. While Axiell Collections has always been very open when it comes to data access through our web API, for instance, being connected has grown to be much more than that. Using data in many ways inside and outside of the collection management system is a necessity and should be facilitated by the system as best as possible. In collections, there are various areas where connectivity plays a vital role, and this will continue to grow. The treasure trove that is your collections database can be used in so many ways, and while features in the CMS may help, for some use cases, you will be using external tools and applications. Easy exchange of data in a standard way is key here. One of the ways to do this is by sharing your data as linked open data. We're currently working on making this very easy by adding a triple store in the Axiell domain with a Sparkle endpoint on top. And this is done in cooperation with Triply and the Dutch NDE, Network Digital Heritage, but also available for organizations outside of the Netherlands, of course. Smaller organizations can get a default setup and they're good to go. For larger organizations, more flexibility is offered, for instance, in what data is put in the triple store. For organizations in the Netherlands, NDE helps with funding, sharing your data like this, because it's mandated by the government. For organizations outside of the Netherlands, this service is available as an optional add-on. I mentioned artificial intelligence already. In that context, when sharing data or when you want to do analysis of your data, the quality of the metadata and the disambiguation of terminology and names helps vastly improve the results and the use of this data. And this is where AI may help. Axiell are doing research on how AI can add value to your system, your workflows, your data. This project is presented in another session in these digital days, so make sure to check it out. It's very fascinating. And we'll be continuing to explore AI and what it can bring us. So more news to follow later. Over the years, we've been doing so many integrations with third-party systems, many dam systems notably, including, of course, our own Piction dams, whom we have a partnership with. We've done integrations with providers of persistent identifiers, with external thesauri, authority files such as Getty AAT, and with several national terminology providers. All of these integrations are basically available as add-ons out of the box, which means they can be implemented with a minimum effort with standard configuration, because most of the work has been done in the first time implementation. Other integrations are expected to be added to the portfolio, such as integrations with condition report apps, more dam systems, and additional PID providers, for instance. So more is coming out of the box in the near future as well. For a number of topics that I've talked about in this session, Axiell will be organizing more in-depth webinars in the second half of this year. And via these webinars, we can showcase more new features, give you more details about other upcoming things, explain how they can be implemented, and answer more detailed questions. We will announce these webinars via our monthly newsletters. If you don't receive them yet, make sure to register to not miss out on any upcoming events or the latest on Axiell collections or any other Axiell-related news. Thank you for watching this presentation.
Welcome back. Thank you, Renee. I'm excited to welcome Renee to the stage. She's our product manager for Axiell Collections. Hi, Renee. Good to see you.
Hi, Samantha. Thank you.
Yes. So just a quick reminder before we get started, if you're watching, you can add any questions that you have for me or Renee in the chat, and we'll answer them live in the next couple of minutes. So Renee, you covered a lot in your presentation, but I wanted to take a quick step back and kind of talk to you about the product management process. So how do you decide what features to build, and what does the process look like from development through to release from your perspective?
Yeah, there's a couple of sides to that. One is that we've made some changes this year in how we plan releases. We're now what we call applying milestones, and milestone usually leads up to a new version, a new release. And by doing that, we are a bit more stricter in what we plan, and that also means that we can be also more transparent about it. So we can announce features that we're going to develop and try to have a good chance that we actually do that. If not too many things pop up in the meantime. But the plan is then to have a clearer roadmap, and especially with the timing of the things that we're developing. The other part of that is how do we decide what pops up in the roadmap? Actually, I would say most of what we put on the roadmap is actually coming from our customers. These are ideas that have been put in the ideas portal, for instance. This is for us a very important input channel for anything that customers need, new features or improvements on existing features. So there's a lot of that we pick up from that channel, but We also talk to customers. Obviously, we talk to customers a lot, and on the different events or in person. And there also we listen and we try to see what's important and what lives. And I would say a third channel is also projects. When we do projects, we know also that maybe some things are required, and that can also be a reason to put them on the roadmap.
Yeah, and one of the presentations earlier today from Axiell COO Maria Vossing, she talked a lot about this customer-driven strategy, this customer-driven product strategy. And one of the other things she mentioned, and you mentioned in your presentation, was around this UX UI work and the survey that you launched earlier this year and at the end of last year. I was wondering, since you worked very closely with that survey, if you could just elaborate a little bit more on what you learned from customers' feedback there.
Yeah, actually, we got a lot of feedback. That's one of the things that was very good. So there's definitely something that people want to contribute for this type of changes that we plan to do in the software. A lot of feedback was given, and it was also very useful feedback. And what we also could see from all the things, all the replies and the notes that people could add, is that there's a lot of common area where people have ideas for improvements and things that we can do. So that's also good, because that means that then when we pick up on these things, this is actually going to help a wide range of customers and users of the system. We're now at the stage where we are sort of determining what could be done in the low-hanging fruit, let's say, that the easier things to do that can still have a big impact for our users. We want to bring those changes to new releases as fast as possible. So that's now the stage where we are in, and hopefully we can then already show some of the improvements by the end of this year. But there definitely will be bigger things as well, that bigger developments that may span multiple milestones. That's also an option. But we want to do things in an iterative way, so that we can bring the benefits as soon as possible to the customers.
Yeah, iteration has been a big theme in the conference so far, from a lot of different perspectives, but this idea that there's a bit of a feedback loop and we're making sort of incremental changes and validating it along the way. So it's great to hear you talk about that. One of the pillars that you talked about is flexibility, and this idea that you can have optional features and out-of-the-box integrations, and you can kind of opt in and opt out of things. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about the integrations. Sort of what are the possibilities around that? Where do you see it going? And is there a place where someone could access a list of what all the current off-the-shelf integrations are?
Yeah, that's a good point. We've done so many integrations over the years, and all these pieces and of the puzzles are sort of lying on the shelves, but we don't really have a clear sort of a short list or an overview describing all these things and all these other products that we integrate with. So that's actually something that we can do, and make that more insightful, so that people know what's there. And then that could even maybe help the customers decide if they want to go for a certain product, because they know we have experience with that already, and that can be also a more economic solution in that sense. So we'll work on that overview. So that's going to happen soon.
Yeah, fantastic. And I loved how you framed the discussion around these three pillars. So another pillar was this idea of connectivity or connected systems. Axiell, we've talked a lot about the ecosystem and the platform approach, building internal tools as well as external tools. One of the things you mentioned in this context was linked and open data. And I wanted to see if you could elaborate a little bit more on this and why it matters so much to museums and archives.
Linked data or linked open data, it means sharing your data to the outside world. Basically, that's what you do, and that also means that you can then leave it up to others what they want to do with your data. So it's not always you don't always do it for yourself per se, but you're also doing it for the community. For instance, in the Netherlands, there's a mandate from the government that cultural heritage organizations should share their data as linked data. So that connections can be made with data. Well, a good example was in the AI session that was done as well. So if people want to check that out, it's very interesting, where you can see connections between the different for instance, between different persons that maybe you wouldn't see otherwise. And if you can then connect to other data sets, you suddenly see all these connections and you can get more information about them. There's lots of use cases that you can come up with. And it's not always end user use cases. This could be also for analysis of the data, for instance, to see all these connections that you normally don't, or you wouldn't see because you don't have those data in your own environment. It's the possibilities are really endless, and it's really also up to the market what they want to do with the data. What we want to do is facilitate and make sure that you can create those connections.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you brought up the AI project. There are two presentations, one by Dave Thomas, the CTO, and another by a group of our collaborators working on the AI project. Both are excellent watches. I recommend them. And in that presentation, they also talked about this sort of iterative approach of starting with something small, getting feedback, iterating and iterating. So a lot of connections there. And I know, Renee, you're also involved in that project pretty closely. So I wanted to ask you about IIIF. I mentioned that in the presentation as well. So we're supporting IIIF as well as supporting many more media types. I was wondering if you could elaborate on that a little bit technically about how we're doing that and what it means for our users.
Yeah, the current situation is that the media formats that we support are basically the formats that HTML5 support. So native formats, if you will. So that's MP4 for streaming media, or JPEG, obviously. But there's not a lot of formats that are supported by default. What we want to do is extend that, and we're looking currently into ways on how to do that, and at the same time also to be IIIF compliant. And one of the ways we can do that with is by supporting, for instance, other types of media servers, image servers like Cantaloupe, for instance, heavily used as well in the IIIF realm. So now in the upcoming version, we'll support media systems like that, media servers or image servers. And that automatically brings that you can have a IIIF deep zoom, for instance. You can view IIIF-ified images, if you will, and automatically also a whole range of other formats are then displayed in the media viewer. So that's by installing that third-party component, which is open source. We now bring that for at least for the images already in the next version. For streaming media, we're also looking into how we can do that, but that probably takes other types of media systems in the back end.
Yeah, it's really interesting to kind of see where we were, where we are now, and where we're going with all that media support. So as we wrap up here, I just wanted to give you a chance to plug your webinars. You're going to be having some more in-depth webinars around some of the features you talked about today.
Yeah, this session obviously is quite short, and we couldn't go into too much detail here. But we know from customer feedback that a bit more detail is valued and appreciated. So we want to accommodate that by organizing webinars that showcase the more interesting features of new releases or recent releases. And in those webinars, we can show how they work, and we can also talk about what it takes to implement them, if it takes anything to implement them and to get them. So that's upcoming, and we'll announce all those webinars through the normal channels, like the newsletter, for instance. So that's planned for the second half of this year.
Fantastic. Well, Renee, thank you so much. It's great to see you again, and appreciate your presentation and being a part of this Q&A.
Yeah,
next
thanks for having me.
Yes, thanks, Renee. Alrighty, so next up, we have a session on the EMU roadmap. But before we get started with the next session, I wanted to make a short announcement. Malcolm Howard, our VP of Sales, has prepared an excellent presentation that's available in the recordings library. The presentation is called Making an Informed Decision on Dams, Key Factors Driving Investment in Integrated Digital Asset Management. It's really great presentation. And if you're interested in learning more about the platforms and different types of add-ons that we offer around Axiell collections, this is a great video to watch. Now, Malcolm isn't here for the live Q&A, but you can watch the presentation in the recordings channel using the link below. Okay, so now on to the EMU roadmap session. It's called What's Next for EMU? A Look Towards the Future, and it is presented by Dominic Marshall, the EMU product manager at Axiell. As a final reminder, you can log your questions in the chat box throughout the presentation and we'll address them after. So go enjoy the video and we'll see you back here soon.
Hi, my name is Dominic Marshall. I work with Axiell. I'm the EMU product manager there. I took over the role a couple of years ago. And today I'll be having a look at EMU and sustainability, what we've been doing for the last couple of years and where we're heading for the next couple of years. The last couple of years, a couple of years ago, we decided that we needed to do some work with EMU to make it more sustainable and more usable for everyone going forward. So we moved with the help of the Field Museum and the Smithsonian to start a process of trying to standardize modules to use a shared schema. Some initial work was done by the Field Museum and the Smithsonian to propose a new bibliography module, a simplified bibliography module that would then use a standard schema, and therefore those institutions that adopted it would be on the same schema. So the work for that took place in 2022 and was delivered in 22, a new bibliography module using a schema that can be shared by anyone who adopts that bibliography module. We also have work going on at the moment in the parties and the multimedia modules. There's a working group looking after each of those, trying to do the same thing, establish a common set of fields and a common set of tabs whereby institutions can then adopt the new common module and thereby moving on to a schema that is in use by other organisations. As part of improving EMU in the last couple of years, we've tried to remove the dependency on TextPress in particular and some of the functions within TextPress that were causing users issues. So for the EMU 8 release in 2022, we decided to add a Solar as an indexing mechanism that could be used instead of the standard TextPress indexing. The big advantage of moving to Solar as the indexing mechanism was that some of the queries that were traditionally quite slow in EMU, range sort of queries for latitudes, longitudes, dates, times, are much, much faster in Solar. But perhaps the biggest advantage of anyone moving to Solar is the fact that the system can run now 24/7 using the Solar indexing because there's no need to do any system maintenance. We also decided that we needed to make EMU to provide better integrations between EMU and other systems. So as part of the work for the bibliography module, we developed a new API subsystem to sit within EMU that would allow us to more easily integrate with external APIs. So part of that bibliography work saw us integrate with BHL quite successfully, which now enables us to, in real time, pull data from BHL. So moving forward, as we work through standardizing the modules, we'll be able to quite easily add interfaces to other external sources to pull or to share data with those sources. We also released this year, as part of EMU 9, RESTful API, enabling people more simply to gain data from EMU. The RESTful API provides a standard CRUD functionality and replaces the older, much more complicated IMU API. So we're hoping that moving forward, people will be able to more easily interact with the EMU server to get data that they may need to ship externally or to use for a web interface. Also, we noticed that over time, EMU would be becoming much more resource intensive. So part of the reason for choosing Solar as the indexing mechanism was not just that it was quicker but also was because the indexing disk footprint was much, much smaller than the footprint that was used by TechSpress. So the added advantage of Solar was not just faster queries, but also less disk space being used. For the EMU9 release, we've done a large amount of work on the server, the idea being to reduce the memory that's being used by the EMU server. The EMU server process had become quite large, and the more memory that's used by processing, the less memory that's available to the machine for disk caching, meaning that overall the machine will run slower. So the rework of memory that we've done in EMU9 significantly reduces the memory footprint, creating a large amount of free space that can now be used for disk caching. As part of that memory rework, we looked at a number of processes that were quite slow, sorting, reporting, exporting, and the system maintenance, the large amount of downtime that was required for that. With the memory changes, we've been able to significantly increase the speed of those processing. So you'll find with EMU9, a lot of those slower processes are now running much quicker. Also, as part of EMU9, we removed the restriction on the amount of data that could be entered into a field. As time goes by, institutions collect larger amounts of data, and now you can put in any amount of data or any number of rows within a list, and that's available with EMU9. We also tried to remove a dependency on Axiell, the need to engage Axiell in order to change standards when a standard changed. The idea came from the Field Museum to develop a standards module, and we hope that with the release of that with EMU9, that institutions now have great flexibility in developing their own exports and changing the format of those anytime that they see fit. We also tried to remove the need for Unix system administrators, so to manage accounts within the EMU system. So we added in, as part of EMU8, the OpenID Connect, allowing authentication to take place against predefined authentication systems, meaning that user accounts no longer needed to be administered on the EMU server. Over the last couple of years, we've also enhanced the support for multimedia. As time goes by, new media formats come out, and processing of existing formats. We've tried to improve the speed of those by updating ImageMagick to the latest version. We've also, with EMU9, bundled on all of the EMU add-ons, and we're hoping that that provides institutions with a greater flexibility of how they might access their data. So now things like Sapphire or IMU can be used to look or insert data. The RESTful API can be used to access data for web services and things like that. With EMU8, we decided to move EMU to become a 64-bit system. With EMU8, we were able to convert the server fully to 64-bit, but we had some issues converting the client to 64-bit. And one of those in particular was for the language component that we use, and also with the Crystal viewer that we use. Work's been a little bit delayed on those, but we're hoping that moving forward this year that we'll be able to rework the language component and also upgrade Crystal to the latest version, meaning that then we can release a fully 64-bit Windows client. We'd like, moving forward, to enhance the RESTful API. We had a few institutions trial the RESTful API, and the feedback that we received, we got two lots of feedback. The first was that media ingestion doesn't exist. You're able to insert records, retrieve records, and retrieve media, but you're not able to insert media. So an enhancement will be made to the RESTful API, which will allow media to be ingested. The other feedback that we got was that while the documentation on the RESTful API is extremely thorough, it's very difficult to get started. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a tutorial to the API documentation that will allow users to run through the tutorial, which should get them going with the RESTful API. As time goes by, more modern import and export formats evolve. EMU has used the same importing, exporting formats for a large number of years. JSON now has become largely the standard, particularly where data transfer across the web is concerned. So moving forward, we'll be adding a JSON import and a JSON export, allowing data to be ingested into the system or taken from the system in JSON format. We'd like to enhance the interoperability of EMU so that your museum can become a focal point of a larger museum ecosystem. So what we're hoping to do, as I mentioned before, we've built an API subsystem. So we're hoping to improve that, which will allow seamless integration with other systems and also with some other services that Axiell provides that can provide benefit to the museum. At the moment, we've got an integration with Culture Connect, which provides specialised museum experiences for users. We'd like to enhance that a little bit and make that a bit more seamless. Arena is a public-facing, browser-facing service provider, and it provides something that EMU doesn't have, which is a faceted search. So we'd like to get an integration going with Arena, which would allow then faceted searches across a collection. We're working on a bidirectional integration with Pixn Dam system. The one thing missing that will enable us to complete that is what I just mentioned before, an enhancement to the API, which will allow media ingest so that media can be transferred between EMU and any DAM system or vice versa. And we'll look at also enhancing the flow integration that exists at the moment. One of the challenges for EMU is that we are a largely on-premise solution, and a large number of other systems and services are cloud-based services. So we're spending some time also looking at how we can optimize the connections between EMU sitting in on an internal server and cloud-based services sitting externally to an institution. An ongoing focus over the next couple of years is to look at the browser-based interfaces, how usable they are, accessibility and security standards. Over the years, the EMU browser-based interfaces have largely been used internally, but there's been large changes in recent years for accessibility standards and for security standards. And the browser-based interfaces probably haven't kept pace with that. So we'll be looking to enhance those to ensure that each of those interfaces provides a secure interface for both internal and external users of the system. And finally, we'll continue the interactions with our user groups and our working groups. We'd like to move further forward with the shared schema model enhancements. It's a slow process to get those going. To date, we've got the bibliography and some shared work was done on the standard modules. We've got the parties modules and multimedia modules underway, but we've got a large number of modules that we still need to look at. So hopefully we can keep pushing those forward and keep working towards the shared schema across institutions. And finally, we'll continue our interactions through the user group, listening to what our clients are after for the system and provide that in the best way that we possibly can. Okay, thanks to everyone for listening today. For more information on EMU and EMU resources, please visit axiell.com.
Welcome back. I'm excited to have Dominic Marshall join me on stage now. He's the EMU product manager at Axiell, the all-knowing EMU expert. Hi, Dom. Great to have you here.
Hi, Samantha. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. So before we get started, just a reminder to everyone to put your questions in the chat and we'll be answering them live over the next 15 minutes. So first up, we have a question from Gareth. Dom, can you please talk about the solar re-indexing? Is indexing continually happening rather than a re-indexing process happening overnight?
Yes, Gareth, sure. When you move to the solar indexing, we generate at the time that you move the solar, we generate the indexing, and then the indexing gets updated in real time. So every time you're adjusting a record or adding a record, those indexes get updated in real time. So what that means is that the way that TextExpress traditionally works is it sort of does a hybrid sort of method where it half indexes, and then each night with the daily maintenance, we complete the indexing. So with solar, when you change the record, all of the indexing is done at that time. So what that means is there's no need to have any system maintenance, so that instead of taking your system offline each evening and at weekend to maintain the indexing, the solar system can run 24/7.
Excellent. Thank you, Dom. So you covered a lot in the presentation, and one of the things that I saw you mention a few times was this idea of having working groups. You talked about having working groups with specifically around multimedia and parties to help standardize these modules. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the process of working with customer working groups and how that feeds into how we develop and bring features to market.
Sure. The process that's been so far is that a number of institutions have got together and collaboratively worked on defining what they would like to see within the module, what data they would like collected, and what workflow they would like to happen within the module. So all of that information is gathered together, and a document is produced. That document then gets forwarded to Axiell. We'll look at that document and assess the best way that we can produce that functionality for the client base. So we will then produce another document detailing exactly how we think that should be implemented, and return that document to a broader EMU community for review. So once the broader community reviews that, we'll take any feedback from that, put it back into the document, and come up with a final document that will allow us then to build a module that hopefully is usable by all institutions should they choose to move to it. As we add each of these new rework modules, each institution has their own choice whether they wish to move to it or remain with their existing structure. The big advantage of moving to the new structure is that you're then using a shared schema with everyone else that has adopted it in the EMU community, meaning that data sharing becomes much, much simpler.
Yeah, that's really fantastic. We've talked a lot during Digital Days about this sort of customer-driven collaborations and a community-driven way of developing product. I think it's pretty special. Not every company takes that approach, and I think it really reflects sort of the culture and ethos of Axiell. So thank you for sharing that process. I think it's helpful for a lot of folks who maybe haven't been in a working group but are benefiting from the output of such groups. So also in your presentation, you talked about quite a few API updates, including bundling this in the product in 2023. So I was wondering if you could elaborate on that and kind of explain what that means for customers and how it's different from how we packaged APIs differently in the past.
Sure. Previously, EMU had a lot of add-on products, which were paid for add-on products. With EMU 9, we decided that we would bundle all of those add-on products and just become EMU. So rather than having different product, IMU, Go, Flow, etc., which all use different APIs, we decided to develop a new RESTful API, primarily to help institutions extract data for web interfaces. Obviously, publishing content has become very important for museums to share the data that they've collected. So we had an old IMU interface, which particularly web developers found very difficult to work with. So most modern web developers now are very comfortable using RESTful APIs. So we decided to develop a new RESTful API that would allow those web developers to more easily interact and extract data from the EMU system. So with EMU9, when we install the RESTful API, and we make sure the RESTful API is operational, so that from the moment that customer gets EMU9, they're able to access the API and therefore, the collection data through that API.
Excellent. Well, we had a couple more questions come in, including one from Beth about the API services. So she asks, will the integration of other citation API services be configurable by EMU clients, perhaps via the registry, or would development be required by Axiell? And she adds, I'm thinking of possible interfaces with Crossref and DataCite.
What happened when we released the bibliography module, which was the first API that we integrated there with BHL, is that we built into EMU an API subsystem. Unfortunately, it's not possible just through registry entries to connect to it to an API and then extract data from an API. But I would hope that with the working groups for the module reworks for those APIs that are of benefit across all institutions, that the connections to those would be included as part of that rework, so that those APIs would come along as part of the rework. There is no way around Axiell doing some coding for the API, because every API is different. The call to every API is different. The authentication to every API is different. So there is a little bit of development work that is, even though we have built an API subsystem, there still is a little bit of development work that is required to actually connect to those APIs and extract the data.
Okay, excellent. Well, we have a couple more questions coming in, two from Kirsty. The first one is, are you still using the EMU Ideas portal to inform changes to EMU? You can talk a little bit about that.
Yes, look, the AHA portal has been there for quite some time, and if I was 100% honest, I'd say we've hardly looked at it in the last 18 months, and the reason for that is that along with everyone else who suffered through COVID, we've lost some staff over COVID. Finally, I've managed yesterday to hire 2 staff. So now we'll, going forward again, start looking at the AHA portal, have a look what's important there, and start progressing those ideas that have been submitted within in the portal. So, our apologies to everyone who's been waiting on those. We just haven't had the resources to be able to progress those. But now, as I said, we've just picked up a couple. So hopefully in the second half of the year, you'll start to see some of those ideas being pushed through.
Yeah. Well, you've been busy with all the things that you talked about in your presentation, and it sounds like now is a really good time for folks to log into the Ideas portal and add some fresh new ideas, because you'll be looking at it. So that's really great. Pro tip. We have another question from Kirsty. She says, interested in the delay with the 64-bit upgrade. Does this mean large, greater than 2 gigabyte multimedia will still be partitioned in our servers?
No. The delay, the 64-bit delay is only with the client. So the client that sits on the Windows machine, the EMU server is fully 64-bit, which means that all files within the EMU server system can access the size of 64-bit, which is a huge file. So no, there's no more partitioning on the EMU server.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about the bundled add-ons. So you talked about this a little later on in your presentation, bundled add-ons for greater institutional flexibility. I know this was a pretty big initiative, thinking about how we package and repackage things around EMU. Can you talk a bit more about this idea of bundling and how it works and why it's beneficial to the customers?
Sure. Look, over the years, there's been some add-on products developed for EMU. Stuart, in his next presentation, will speak a little bit about a couple of those. customers have used them, and some customers have never seen them. So as part of the EMU9 bundling, as part of the installing, we install on the machine all those add-on products and get them operational, so that a customer who hasn't used IMU, which allows you to publish data to the web, Sapphire, which was developed as a rapid data entry tool, but is a lot more than that. You're able to have a play with those and see how you may be able to use those more beneficially for your institution. And also you may be able to talk to other institutions who are already using them and see what they do with them and how they use them and what benefit they're providing for their institution.
Excellent, thank you. Well, I wanted to ask you a little bit about looking forward and what you're excited about in terms of what's coming down the road. You talked about a number of different things, but sort of medium term, what's interesting you most? What are you most excited about?
Look, I think probably the most exciting thing for me is the ability to interact with the clients, and particularly at our monthly meetings that are across the different the 3 regions. From those meetings, we're able to get some ideas, some direction of where the actual customer base thinks the product should go. I mean, we're all programmers, we've all got great ideas, but most of them aren't of real benefit to the institution. So the interactions with the institutions collaborating amongst themselves to find a solution that's workable for all of them, which moves EMU towards a more shared schema in the future, which will allow data sharing to a much broader audience, I think is exciting.
Yeah, fantastic. I love that. And you mentioned these EMU monthly meetings. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how they work, how they're structured, when they are, for folks that are not participating and may want to.
Yes, look, there's a special interest group site. I'm sure Rial or someone can stick a plug for that in the chat. But every month we have a meeting either in APAC, North America, or Europe. And the idea is that the client base submit agenda items so that we can run through those agenda items and work out the best way forward for everyone, be that in terms of development or issues that they're having, or even just bantering around an idea or trying to recruit someone to assist them working through something. So I think they're certainly of benefit to us, Axiell, and probably of good benefit to the user base as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dom. It's always a pleasure to see you and talk to you about EMU. Thank you for the presentation and being here for the Q&A.
Thanks, Samantha. Thanks, everyone, for your time.
All right, awesome. Okay, so our next presentation is an EMU training. It is hosted by Stuart Cousins, an EMU systems analyst at Axiell, and it is titled Meet Your New Tools, IMU and Sapphire. So take a look at that video and afterwards come back here for a chat.
Hi, my name is Stuart Cousins and I work for Axiell. I'm part of the EMU research and development team, and my role within that team is EMU analyst. I'm based in the Melbourne office in Australia, and I'm proud to say I've been with the organisation for over 34 years. I'm here to tell you about the EMU9 bundle and some of the new technologies that are going to come automatically with that bundle. Since its first release, the EMU installation bundle is comprised of just the EMU client interface, the one that you know as the Windows client. But in parallel, we've been developing browser-based EMU user interfaces that have been available for purchase and installation as separate packages. This separation has actually been an impediment to implementation of them because once EMU is installed, it's hard to get another project going and get the funding and see the vision for use of other interfaces. The EMU Windows client that we all know and love. Because of this, we are now introducing the EMU 9 bundle. So as of your upgrade to EMU 9, the suite of all EMU interfaces will be included in the EMU installation bundle. This includes browser-based interfaces such as IMU and Sapphire, and the RESTful APIs. Because they're going to be installed out of the box, it means that they'll be ready to go as soon as the installation is finished. So you'll be able to access them and play with them straight away. Doesn't mean you have to go online, doesn't mean you have to do anything with them, but they'll be available and they'll certainly fuel food for thought. Because the EMU installation bundle is going to be more than just a Windows client, we're now using the term EMU to refer to all of the technologies that are being installed. This presentation provides a brief overview of the IMU and Sapphire systems that are included in the EMU 9 bundle and how they may be leveraged to improve public and institutional access and efficiency. IMU. IMU is a ready-to-go website. It stands for Internet Museum, and it's a browser-based interface designed to provide internet and/or intranet access to your system. A default design scheme is available out of the box. It's ready to go and draws data directly from your EMU modules. If you have a customized EMU system, it is possible that some minor configuration changes may be required if you have different fields to that in our standard one. But for the most part, it should be used and accessible straight out of the box. All of the data presented by IMU on a web page is drawn directly from your EMU systems, and in particular, the narratives module and the catalog module. I'll just give you a brief run through the default out of the box IMU. It comprises a landing page, which has a multimedia image on it with a search box in the middle. So that's a general search. It can search all of your content or just specific modules. The browse page is the next tab, and that allows you to give a user guided access through your collections. So the idea behind that is people don't need to know what they're searching for. They can click on images or narratives and just follow their nose through your collection. There's a highlights tab, which provides quick access to items of particular interest. And finally, a parties tab, which gives you access to the parties module. I'll just run through some of these so you can see what I'm talking about. This is the default landing page. You'll see a search box in the middle of it. And you can have as broad or as narrow a search using a drop-down box here. The image behind comes out of your multimedia. So in this case, we're just showing our default demonstration image, but it's up to you, and you can change it as often as you like. The structure of the IMU website is hierarchical and is created simply by linking records together. If you can imagine, at the top, we have a single narratives record, which may tell a story and have some multimedia. And then underneath that, we can have any number of narratives records, maybe representing various collections. And under those, each may have any number of sub-narrative records, and so on and so on. So as it says here, any number of narrative and object records can be linked, meaning that the website is dynamic and can be updated by the institution with no programming required. As an example here, I have an image of our top level browse page, and this, you see the browse tab there, and this is just our demonstration museum. Again, the image comes out of our multimedia. The text comes out of the narratives record, and underneath we've attached different narratives records representing the various collections we have in our demonstration system. So likewise, you can create your own narratives records corresponding to collections or other things that you want to make available on the internet, and just link them to the main narratives record, and they will immediately appear in your website. This process can go so on and so on, add any number of narratives, and then your object records. So at the end of it, people browsing your website will finally come across those objects that they've been looking for. As I said, any number of hierarchy levels can be added by the institution, guiding the user through collections, which is particularly useful when somebody doesn't know the breadth of your collections. They don't need to know a search term. They can just have a look at, say, some of the narratives and think, what are they interested in? And just follow their interest and gradually drill down. All narrative details and multimedia is drawn directly from EMU. So when you need to update the information on the page, it can be just simply edited in an EMU record, and it's immediately updated on your website. Okay, that was a whirlwind trip through EMU. To cover that off, I should say that the default interface out of the box is what you've seen now, but it can be customized in any way you like. It can be completely rewritten. What we're doing is just enabling a ready-to-go out-of-the-box user interface so that it gives you a starting point and you can have a play with that. You don't even need to make it publicly accessible if you don't want to. But it'll give you a starting point and maybe food for thought as far as presenting your collections to the World Wide Web. Okay, moving on to Sapphire, the second part of this very quick demonstration. For those of you who are unfamiliar with it, Sapphire is an interface that enables you to create configurable web forms for query, insert, and update. So Sapphire is intended more for project-based work within your institution. It's a browser-based form builder that enables you to access EMU. So it allows you to create a web form with as many or as few fields on it, and link those to EMU so that that web form will search, will edit, or will insert into EMU straight away. Forms can be created and modified on the fly by the institution. So they're very, very flexible and they don't need Axiell to do the work. We're happy to help you or guide you along the way, but they're very easily designed. They don't require any programming skills, and you can have as many as you like. Again, they allow searching, inserting, and updating in real time. So when you tap data into a Sapphire form and hit the save button, it goes straight into your EMU database. It can be run on any web-enabled device, so your smartphones, your tablets, etc. So that means you've got you've got mobility. You can take a phone or a tablet down into your storerooms, or take them anywhere and still access Sapphire and have a direct connection with EMU. Sapphire supports interactive media capture from devices with cameras. So you could be down in a store and notice some damage or need an update on multimedia for a particular object, and you could take a photo with your phone and have it uploaded immediately to EMU. Access to fields can be tightly controlled. So you can create a fairly basic Sapphire form with just one or two fields on it, because you may have a project where you have external people coming in or volunteers, and you really just want them to be able to type into one or two fields. So it's up to you what fields you present to each user. And finally, because it's a web form, it's ideal for use by casual users, people who are not familiar with EMU, and in particular, people such as volunteers who would be familiar with web forms, but presenting them with the EMU Windows client would be a very steep learning curve. When it's installed, Sapphire comes with several default forms. These are forms that we've created at Axiell and encompass quite a variety of different applications. They're all included, they're all there, and you can start using them immediately. You can also modify them if you like and commence creating your own forms. Obvious applications for Sapphire: object relocation, condition checking, audits and stock take, revaluation, data entry, image capture, and geolocation capture. Remembering that when you're using these forms, you can take them on your phone or your tablet, anywhere you like, and enter data to support these processes. Just a very quick example. I mentioned the stock take form. In this case, I did a search on stock take location S-001, and that turns out to be National Museum, main campus, etc. I've narrowed the form down for brevity on this slide. And then I've gone through and scanned the barcodes on all of the items. Now, the barcodes in the case of our museum are just simply the IRN numbers, but here we are. I found all of these items. Now, if I hit save, they'll be uploaded to EMU, and EMU will just have a look and say, well, okay, we've cited these. Great, they're there. That one shouldn't have been there, and this one is missing, and it shouldn't have been there, but you didn't enter it. Digitization project. This is, for instance, a data entry one. Once again, we've gone in and found the particular object that we're interested in doing data entry for, and it's brought up the label image associated with that object, and then a volunteer or whoever's working on the project can simply transcribe the detail on that label into EMU and click the OK button. I won't dwell on Sapphire anymore because during our virtual user conference in 2020, we recorded 2 Sapphire presentations. The first one was practical applications for everyday problems, and it goes through in more detail those forms that I've just covered, which are delivered with your bundle. And it covers off a lot more information about Sapphire. The second session that we recorded was forms design, and this goes through or demonstrates the creation of simple Sapphire forms, and hopefully shows you that the creation of forms is something that can be done easily in-house. It's very easy to develop a new form. And I should say, while we're at it, that scripts and programs can be attached to a Sapphire form. So it's not really just a matter of setting up a form where fields are attached to fields. You can actually make it as complex as you like. You can trigger all sorts of things like emails, data cleansing, accessing other tables, and what have you. Its applications range from the very simple to the very complex. And I think the limitations are only bound by those of our imagination. Thank you for following through this whirlwind tour of two of the technologies that are now available with EMU 9. I wholeheartedly encourage you to have a play with them because they are going to be available out of the box. If you would like to know any further information, please don't hesitate to contact us. But I'm really excited to see them being bundled because I think they have a lot of potential. So I hope you can see and take up my enthusiasm.
Welcome back. Joining me on stage now is Stuart Cousins, EMU Systems Analyst. Hi, Stu. Great to see you. Oh, let's get you unmuted. Okay, can you hear us? Okay, Riel, I'm not sure. We can't quite hear you yet, Stuart. One sec. We'll get started with the Q&A in just one moment. I think we
Can
might
you hear me now?
Fantastic. Yes, we can hear you. Hi, Stuart. Nice to see you.
You too, Samantha. Hi.
Okay. I have to say, we got a lot of questions in, a lot of Sapphire questions, so I'm going to zip through them in the next 15 minutes. But just to get started, with regard to IMU, I wanted to know if you could talk a little bit about like what you see as the biggest value proposition for using IMU versus, say, building a site from scratch.
Look, IMU is a brilliant way of just getting a feel, getting your collection online, and it could be just intranet access or internet access, but it gives people a user-friendly and an intuitive interface. I mean, compare that with, say, getting a user to search through your collections with EMU. It's ready to go. We've been building web interfaces for years, bespoke interfaces, and the complexity of just even designing it, coming up with ideas, it's often a long and involved process. Whereas, given that IMU is up and going straight away, you can have a play with it. And if it turns out that you want to completely redevelop everything, you get some other ideas, you'd like to implement things, that's fine. But this, I mean, straight out of the box, it just saves so much development time and project effort, and it gives you, will inspire the users to come up with their own ideas and designs.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Yeah, I think sometimes just getting the first version up is so helpful, and then you can iterate and enhance over time. I work a lot with the Culture Connect product, which is very design and user interface heavy. So I understand the complexity of website design and good user interface design. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've been doing it for a lot of years and a lot of different designs, and we've settled on one that we think is a really great starting point and can be embellished and enhanced. And yeah.
Fantastic.
So that's what everyone gets with EMU 9.
Yes, excellent. Well, we do have another question from Gareth about IMU. So can the IMU search box search across multiple fields and modules like a Google single search box, for example?
It can. Absolutely. It's a matter of configuration. Naturally, out of the box, we've just set up a basic sort of a configuration, but it can be extended. I mean, it's with a default position, it's impossible to cover all bases. But yes, the answer is you can search multiple modules and multiple fields.
Excellent. Gareth also asks about IMU. Does IMU respect user group security settings, or is the access level just flat? And whatever fields you add to the pages, everyone can see and search?
That's a good question, Gareth. Look, there are a couple of ways you can use IMU. You can present a public access interface, which is just going to be flat because you have anonymous browsers going in. So that's going to be a very basic, most limited and most secure access. But you can also set up a login on your IMU. So you log in using your EMU credentials, and that will then respect your credentials. So they will typically be different pages, obviously, to those that you present to the public. But if you do go down that path and you can support both models at the same time, that's absolutely fine. But they very much do respect your security, and we have a lot of sites that do that. In the IMU community.
Excellent. So we have a bunch of questions now from the audience about Sapphire. And the first one that came in was from Janie. And it's a little bit of a long question, so there's some context first and then the question at the end. So collecting institutions have a daily need to manage the movement of collection items, including stock takes. This is a key security requirement. To help manage this, most institutions have or plan to use barcodes with scanners. A number of organizations have started using Sapphire for this purpose. So the question is Sapphire going to be further developed and supported by Axiell for this purpose?
Oh, absolutely. It's part of our roadmap, and we'll. Okay, do I have you?
Yes. Can you start the answer again, Stuart? Thanks.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Look, Sapphire is definitely part of our roadmap, and it's something we want to continue to develop. I think it's a really powerful tool, and stock takes is one of the simplest and most useful applications of Sapphire. And I think there's in one of the presentations, I think the first one that I spoke about in the slides, it covers our basic out of the box stock take application, which is kind of cool. It uses barcodes to simplify it, but you don't need to have barcodes. So you can walk around with a tablet or an iPhone, scan a location, scan all of the objects in that location, and you hit the save button, and all of the objects that have been scanned are updated as being cited in the catalogue, by whom and at the time and date. Then it actually checks to make sure that those objects should have been in that location. So if you scanned an object that was recorded as being someone else, it flags an exception saying, why is it there for the file? And if you don't scan something that is supposed to be in that space, it says, well, this is missing, and flags that as an exception. So then you can go follow those up manually. But sorry, short answer, absolutely. And I think Sapphire is a great tool for that application.
Fantastic. Great question, Janie. Thank you. Our next question is from Allison. She asks, with the updates to Sapphire and EMU, will it be easier to build Sapphire forms that work across modules?
That will be something for ongoing development. I think at the moment, Sapphire is a sort of a single module plus multimedia, but that is something I see as future development of Sapphire. It will be particularly useful. But what I would say is, for instance, at the moment, Sapphire, you would develop an interface to go to the catalog and also multimedia, because multimedia is included as an adjunct for any module. We have scripts. You can develop a script that post-processes a Sapphire form, and indeed that's what happens with the stock take form. So even though, as it stands, Sapphire is basically connected to a single module plus multimedia, we take the data that's been typed in on the screen and then go and do all sorts of things with it, which includes looking at interrogating other databases, updating other databases, etc. So these scripts sort of give you the power to do anything you like with other modules, or sending out emails, or what have you, creating new records. And the scripts are not, they're standalone scripts, so they don't have to be rolled out with an EMU. They can be developed by an institution, and they can take any form. So that way, I was trying to highlight the fact that Sapphire is not just a web form where data goes from a field into a target field in or destination field in EMU. You can actually do a whole lot of things with it just by attaching a fairly simple script to that form.
Yeah, it sounds like a really powerful tool. We have another question from Annie. She asks, are the Sapphire samples only available in the latest Sapphire version?
No, they are not. The sample forms can be sent out to anybody that has Sapphire. I would certainly recommend getting the latest Sapphire for obvious reasons. So I'm trying to adjust the light here so you can see me. But they are available, and in actual fact, Sapphire forms are easy to share because they really are just a registry record. There's nothing more to it. It's not a separate Sapphire module. It's just a record. So we can send those out as an attachment, and you can load those.
Excellent. Thank you for that clarification. Our next question is from Joe. They ask, is it possible to share forms that are created and export, for example?
Absolutely. As I say, the record itself is just a registry record. So you create a form. When you create a Sapphire form and you put your fields, pick your fields and all of their attributes and things, that information is saved in a registry record. You don't ever need to see that record, but the upshot of that is it can be shared. It can be sent to other people. You can share amongst institutions who can then save it, copy it, and then develop it further. So it's very, very simple.
Okay, excellent. So before I move on with some of the final questions asked so far, just wanted to invite the audience to pop their questions into the chat because we have a couple more minutes, but this is sort of a last call. Okay, so the next question is from Kirsty. She asks, field collection forms for live specimen collecting. Is that a good use case for that?
Absolutely. I think it's ideal. There are so many applications this could be put to, but that is one of them. The one thing is, of course, you need to have access to Emu at the moment. It's not an offline app. So you would want to make sure that while you're out in the field, you have a web connection to or web access to Emu. But the great thing about Sapphire, and I'd encourage everyone to watch those two videos, but it allows you to validate the data as it's going in. So you can ensure that mandatory fields are completed. You can ensure that people use the drop-down lists out of Emu, all of those sorts of things. So while you're out in the field, you get the data, you're guaranteed of data integrity, and the data goes straight into Emu. So it's great, and you can customize forms so quickly. So if you're going out in the field for one particular project, create a form, very easy. Next project might be slightly different. Copy the form and just tweak it accordingly. So you're not just carrying baggage of fields that you do not need. And that extends to, say, data entry with volunteers. Same thing. You get casual users who don't need to know Emu, but you can have volunteers enter data, and then behind the scenes on your form, you've got you might have a status flag that flags the record as provisional. So it's not retrievable by everybody. And then you can come along and QA the record before you set it to being accessible to everyone. So that's just another use. But yeah, Kirsty, great example.
Yeah, that last use case you talked about where you've got these sort of non-power users that need to enter information, and then you want to have this ability to QA it before it becomes part of the official record. I know that's a very, very valuable use case for a tool like this across all institutions. Great question. So the next question is from Joe. She asks, are there plans for training sessions or workshops for Sapphire?
Not at this stage, but look, a couple of things. There's quite a substantial user manual on our Emu help site. And we have the two sessions that I recorded a couple of years ago. What I would recommend is using the manual and then passing questions on to our service desk, because one of the issues with Sapphire is because it's a tool for designing your own forms. The actual forms design is a fairly straightforward process. So you then move more into application-specific questions. So it's very hard to generate a generic training course, but there's no reason we can't do it. So if that's something our institutions would like and see value in, then of course. And the other thing is, if you just want a head start on Sapphire, we can just do a one-off 1 or 2 hour interactive session with you, and just point you in the right direction and answer your particular questions and help you design forms. And of course, if you really would like Axiell to do it, then we can do it as a project as well.
That's great. It sounds like there's a couple of options. If you're looking for something more around inspiration, then maybe some kind of workshop, or looking at some of the pre-recorded videos from a few years ago, or you can work with Axiell in a one-on-one session, or even have Axiell help design the forms. So a lot of different options depending on what your needs are. Great, that's really great. Okay, so our final question is from Gareth. Do we need to build in extra time with EMU upgrades with all of these bundled products?
That would be probably a Dom question. Look, it's the biggest component of an EMU upgrade is the client and the server side, and they're not going to change. There is going to be a little bit of time for the IMU and Sapphire, but really that's more configuration, and that's using existing system tools like having your HTTPD going, which you probably already have, setting up the ports. Sapphire and IMU use the same text server connection, so that's already working. It's really just a matter of rolling out the files. If you've got HTTPD going, we just unbundle the files. It's not a biggie, so it's not like you're doubling or it's more complex. It's really just a bunch of browser files.
Okay, excellent.
HTML files, yep, and PHP scripts.
Thank you, Stu. Well, before we break, just any final recommendations or words of wisdom for our audience today?
Absolutely. Look, I think I would strongly encourage people to explore these tools. They're available for your use, as we said, straight out of the box, and they can be really powerful. And particularly Sapphire for just simplifying data access and providing forms to casual email users with only the fields on it that you need. It's intuitive. Give it a go, and please get in touch with us because we can help. And I really think there's so many uses for Sapphire, and I look forward to hearing some, hopefully some positive feedback and some new and wonderful applications.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your presentation and being here for the Q&A. We had a lot of really great questions.
You're very welcome, and thanks to everybody for hanging in there. And please, I hope that you've got a lot out of it.
Yes, thank you so much. Alrighty, so thanks everybody for joining day one of Axiell Digital Days. We will be back tomorrow with more content. In the meantime, I encourage you to check out the resources and recordings that you can find lower down on this page, and to send messages on our message board. Have a great day, and we'll see you then.